A few months ago, I made a video about similarities between mythologies. In that video, I suggested that a shared ancestral mythology might be an explanation for these similarities. This shared ancestral mythology would be the mythology of the Indo-European tribes who lived in southern Russia in 4000 BC. The theory goes as follows. People who descended from the Indo-Europeans preserved certain elements from the modern mythology, while they also individually invented new features, whether or not through contact with other peoples. This caused the different descendants to alienate from each other. However, in the roots of their mythology, there can still be found proof of their common origin. The problem with this Indo-European mythology is that there is no directly attested material, since Indo-Europeans lived in prehistoric times where the script was not yet invented. That means that scholars have to reconstruct the modern mythology from inherited similarities found among the other mythologies. That process is called comparative mythology. In general, scholars compare various linguistic, stylistic, and substantive elements from different daughter mythologies in order to reconstruct the Indo-European mythology. The most influential sources for comparative mythology are the Vedic mythology from the ancient Indo-Aryan peoples of northwest India. This is one of the earliest attested and thus one of the most important sources. Another important source for comparative research is Roman mythology. Contrary to the frequent erroneous statement that Rome has no myth, the Romans possessed a very complex mythological system, many of which has been preserved in manuscript. Despite its relatively late attestation, Norse mythology is still considered one of the three most important of the Indo-European mythologies for comparative research, due to the vast bulk of surviving Icelandic material. Baltic mythology has also received a great deal of scholarly attention, as it is linguistically the most conservative and archaic of all surviving branches. Despite the popularity of Greek mythology in Western culture, Greek mythology is generally seen as having little importance in comparative mythology. Due to the heavy influence of pre-Greek and Near Eastern cultures, they overwhelm the little Indo-European material that can be extracted from it. But still, we will never be 100% sure of what the Indo-European mythology would be like. That is why we usually place a prefix proto before Indo-European, because after all, it only remains a theory. So what is Indo-European mythology like, or rather what could it have been like? If you know some things about mythology, many features will seem strangely familiar to you. Cosmology. The Indo-Europeans saw the Earth as a vast, flat and circular continent surrounded by waters. The stars were not bound to any particular cosmic significance and were mostly perceived as ornamental. Also, there was a fundamental opposition between the never-aging gods dwelling above in the skies and the mortal humans living beneath on Earth. According to the scholar Lincoln, the Earth was created by the first man, Manu, and his giant twin brother, Dʰéorszá. They are crossing the cosmos accompanied by a primordial cow. When Manu sacrifices his giant brother, and with the help of heavenly deities, the Sky Father, Storm God, and the divine twins, the Earth was created. The flesh of Dʰéorszá becomes the Earth, his ears grass, his breath the wind, and his head the heavens. The celestial gods offer cattle as a divine gift to Trito, the third man, but the cattle is stolen by a three-headed serpent. He first suffers at his hands, but eventually overcomes the monster, aided by the Sky Father. He then gives the cattle to a priest for it to be properly sacrificed. Trito is now the first warrior, who through his actions maintains a cycle of mutual givings between gods and mortals. The realm of the dead was generally depicted as a lower darkness and the land of no return. Many Indo-European myths relate a journey across a river guided by an old man in order to reach the other world. The Greek tradition of the dead being ferried across the river Styx by Charon is probably a reflex of this belief. Similar stories are also found in Celtic, Vedic, Roman and Norse mythology, while in the Latvian tradition the dead must cross a marsh rather than a river. The other world contains a gate guarded by a multi-headed dog who could also serve as a guide and ensured that the ones who entered could not get out. Interesting side note, this myth theme possibly stems from an even older ancient North Eurasian belief, since similar motifs are also found in Native American and Siberian mythology. This would make it one of the oldest myth themes recoverable through comparative mythology. Several traditions reveal traces of a Proto-Indo-European eschatological myth that describes the end of the world following a cataclysmic battle. The story begins when an archdemon claims a position of authority among the gods. He rampages through the world, and finally the two forces come together to annihilate each other in an all-destroying war. Indo-European beliefs were animistic, which means that every object, place and creature were all given a distinct spiritual essence. That basically means that in every object was a divine presence. The archaic Proto-Indo-European language spoken around 4000 BC had a two-gender system which originally distinguished words between animate and inanimate. That means that the language separated the common term from its deified synonym, for instance fire as an active principle used to refer to the physical entity, fire, while the inanimate spiritual entity was. Most of the gods and goddesses from the Indo-European mythology eventually assimilated into various pantheons, where gods are heavily personified. However, it is probable that the Indo-European gods shared a lack of personification, and therefore there did probably not exist a fixed canon of deities. They also didn't even assign a specific number to the gods. But the term they used to refer to a god was Dyೇws. It has numerous reflexes, for example in Latin, Dyೇws, Old Norse Tyr, Sanskrit Deiwa, etc. The gods are also exempt from death and disease because they were nourished by special elements. It would take us too far to go through every Indo-European god and goddesses, therefore I will save them for another video, so I will speak to you later.